You're listening to the Home Staging Show podcast. I'm your host, Cindy Lin. This is a show where we talk about all things real estate, home staging, and selling your home to live and to sell. Welcome back to season 8. This is episode 10. Hey guys, welcome back to episode 10 of this season. This is the last episode of this season. So I just want to take this time to thank you so much for listening for all this time. Your support really means a lot to me. I've been through so much in the past few years. Stage for More has been through so much as well. We went from a home staging business in San Francisco Bay Area to now an international school of home staging. And all this happened really because of podcast. So I cannot say thank you enough. And thank you so much for supporting me throughout all this time and all these different changes in my personal life as well. So yes, I'm very, very grateful for you. I'm in the process of finding more guests, finding more awesome rock stars in their field to interview for the upcoming season. And we are shooting to come back probably sometime around late May or early June. So if you haven't subscribed to our podcast yet, you can do so on iTunes just by searching for the Home Staging Show in the store. We're also now on Spotify, so you can search for us there as well and subscribe. Subscribing is really the best way to keep up to date to our latest episode. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. You can just go to stagemore.com. And once you hop on our website within 5 seconds or 10 seconds or so, there should be a screen popping up asking you if you want to subscribe to our newsletter. That's another way to not miss any episodes of our podcast. So anyway, on the show today, I'm interviewing Sanja, who's the European Director of IAHSP. So that stands for International Association of Home Staging Professionals. It's a subsidiary of stagehomes.com. We're not affiliated with these organizations, but I think it's very valuable to listening to industry leaders. Sanja has been working as an interior designer, and she is also the founder of The Art of Staging. She has launched her home staging business in 2013 in Chicago, Illinois, and she has moved to Rome, Italy in 2016, where she currently lives and works. She's a certified ASP trainer for stagehomes.com. She's also a certified ASPM, that stands for Accredited Staging Professional Master. And she's also very actively involved in the home staging community, both in Europe and in the States as well. So on today's show, we talk a lot about growth in the home staging industry internationally and how to develop your work in a brand new market. Staging in general is very, very new in Europe, as you might have found out with the podcast with Olivia a couple episodes ago. She's a stager based in UK. And so we talk a lot about that, but we also talk about different ways of working in the home staging industry and also dealing with different scenarios the clients might face. And Sanja also took the time and answered a few of our listeners' questions. So it's a great show today. We chat a lot about staging in Europe and staging in general. And yeah, so I'm really excited to see what you think. Any comments, questions, feel free to put that in the show notes. So that's it. Let's start the show. One of the goals for the show really is to help sellers to understand what home stagers face in the industry and also challenges in their job. Because I can't help it. Like, I talk shop all the time with stagers and stuff. Like, we talk about business models and stuff like that. But I think it's important for the sellers to hear, because they need to understand that this is a real business. It's not a hobby for most of us. You know, people are doing this for a living, and their finesse to it, their skills to it, their actual science behind it. You know, we talk about appealing to buyers, buyer psychology, color theory, and all that. I mean, it really, we're not movers. Like, I think one of the frustrating things in the States when I was working is that some sellers will pay movers more than they're willing to pay stagers. And that doesn't make any sense to me, because anyone can move a table, a chair, whatnot.
That's because they don't perceive the value.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So for me, it's really about education. And that's why I really love guests who are transparent about their business model. And actually most guests are. Like, people are super comfortable about talking about their business, the challenges they face, and things like that. Because I think most sellers really, and real estate agents as well, they have no idea what it takes to do our business. And I think giving consultation is one thing. But when you get into something that's like vacant staging, for example, where there's a lot of logistics involved, like sellers and agents don't really see that behind the scenes stuff. And so I think it's good to talk about it. And every stager has a different take on how they run their business as well. I mean, some are very similar. Like when I've interviewed Edie, for example, I think both our business practices are very similar. The way we run our business policies are very similar, but it's always good to hear from another professional, someone else's perspective. And everyone's market actually is very different. So it's really interesting.
I have a question when it comes to, in your experience, what are some of the common misunderstandings when it comes to staging the house? What is actually meant with, like, who is misunderstanding the whole concept? Like,
so for example, some people think that if we make the house look live-in, like if they just put a television in the living room, that is staging. But for us, that is not staging, because staging is about building the lifestyle, the ambiance, like what buyers want to buy into. Just because you put a TV in the living room, I don't really care about that. I want to buy into the lifestyle that, stagers are trying to create. I'm buying a house because X, Y, and Z. I'm not there because I can put a TV in the living room. Especially I'm a woman. I think most women don't care about the TV aspect.
I also think that one of the biggest misunderstanding, especially here in Europe, is that staging is almost like decorating a house. And I'm fighting against this.
Yeah, so people find it, they will bring all these personal things into staging. And I've seen that in the short time I've been in London as well, because I was on this interview about decors, and I think they were like kind of unsure if, this would be a good idea. Yeah. And then I look over, and then it turns out the person who's sitting next to the interviewer, because they have an open office, like he was listening to everything I was saying. And it turned out he was selling his grandparents' house, and his parents did not believe in staging. They didn't want to do anything. And then so he was really paying attention to what I was saying. But the interesting thing is that he actually really, he understand they need to spruce up the house, but he didn't really understand what staging is, because he thought that if they just buy a broken TV, for example, and then place it in the place where the TV would be to kind of make it look like someone was living there, and that is staging. So people, I think now there's more education, there's TV show and Friends now, and, in London, staging is really booming. But the thing is that people still don't understand fully what staging is. And we run into that in the States as well. Even in San Francisco Bay Area, where staging really started, this Barb used to live in Concord in the Bay Area. And so people were still I don't know, I need to call a stager, but they don't know what is good staging versus bad staging. They think that as long as I hire a stager to stage my house, and that's enough. But there are many different kinds of stagers. There are stagers who are hobby stagers, who just they'll charge you $300 and put a few accessories in the house, and they call that staging. And we know that that's not staging.
Yeah, sometimes it's because they're poor education, or there's no educational background at all. And also because we see on a daily basis more architects and interior designers becoming home stagers, or if they're not becoming in terms of, so no previous training, is that they add this service to what they're already offering. So in their head, they're staging the house without actually knowing that what they're doing, it's not an actual staging.
Right. Yeah. So that's the challenges that we face as an industry. But I think through education and by putting out free content like this out there, it's really going to help people to bridge the gap a little bit. Because we had a Spanish architect. She submitted us, we actually featured her on our blog, and she did a really good job staging actually. But I think she had kind of a styling background. So I think it worked in her case. But if that's kind of, I always think like, it's kind of like the gateway drug. If we can get them in, at least it's something.
Yeah.
So, and then we can educate them in how to make their staging better. Because when I first started as a stager, like my job didn't look like how it was 12 years later, like in the beginning, it didn't look, I think now, like I cringe thinking about it.
You know what it is as well, Cindy, the trends, everything has evolved in the past 10 years. Like start just by looking at the cell phones, the smartphones. Compare the first smartphones to those, the recently released ones. Compare everything like 10 years ago and today, nothing looks the same. Not even fashion or... how we look back at the funny pictures of the hairstyles back in the 80s/90s? It looks ridiculous today, but it didn't 20 years ago. And when it comes to staging and personal experience, you did your best 12 years ago with your knowledge, with your experience, and eventually for that particular client, budget, time frame, and situation.
Yeah. So it has changed as well. And I think that is what the industry is evolving to. And so I think that's why education is very important, because the trends have been changing. And I think the education needs to be changing as well. And that's something I'm really passionate about, because I feel like a lot of courses on the market, it really needs to be updated, and it really hasn't. And I understand why too, because when your business, especially if you're running a training school, when you get to a certain scale, it becomes difficult to change your content dramatically. It has to be done incrementally.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why for me, I'm very passionate about like updating my content and make sure I'm learning all the new trends as well, because I think it's really important that the consumers are evolving and we need to evolve with them too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hope this turns out to be a great podcast for you. If it doesn't, please feel free not to, release it. If for any reason you feel that I haven't delivered the best. And yeah, whenever you want, we can start. I've seen you have some questions from stagers, like we faked these questions, or are these real?
No, these are real, because we have a Facebook group. We asked people to submit questions, and these are the questions they submitted. So before we get officially started, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get into staging?
Hi, Cindy, and thank you for having me on your podcast. My name is Sanja Radovanovic, and I'm an accredited home staging professional master's. And now that I'm thinking, I really comprehend because of so many actions, behaviors, since I was a little kid, and little did I know that I had this sort of a natural inclination towards staging. And the more I think about it, the more it seems that I've been staging like for my whole life since I was, a little girl. And I think this is something that many stagers, have in common. I don't know if you've ever heard other stagers saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And then, so almost 30 years later, the urge and the love that I have for staging has not changed. I kind of find myself that I mentally stage every place I go. Even when I walk down the streets, my mind starts to stage. And I've always been attracted by the real estate sector. So I would document myself and stay up to date, especially because my family has moved a lot in the past 20 years from one country to another and from the continent to the continent. So while I was living in the United States, I remember one of my hobbies was to tour the open houses on Saturdays and Sundays. And it all happened there, between 2011 and 12. And that was the first time that I've heard actually the words home staging. I've approached the selling agent and I've asked him, like, why do you sell this property, empty? And the way it looks, it just doesn't, feel right and feel good. Because I've told him people can't actually relate to the space and the property without being, able to envision themselves living in there. And he just answered like, oh, so you must be a home stager. So that sentence basically changed my life. I'm an interior designer, and I was, designing and redesigning properties, never for sale until that time. And what happened was that after that open house, I went back home. I searched on Google home stager, home staging, and all of a sudden, like, I was illuminated, because for the first time, there was so much information about the industry and about the professionals. And I finally understood that was what I wanted to do. And that was basically what I felt I was doing for my whole life. That's how I got to learn about the creator of the home staging, concept, Barb Schwartz. And I found out about stagehomes.com. I've immediately, like within 3 weeks, I took the accredited staging professional course. And this was in 2013 when I started my staging career. And I was offering my services in Wilmette, which is a suburb of Chicago suburb. So I've staged in the U.S. from 2013, 2016. It's when I moved to Rome in Italy. And most of the time I'm dedicating to serving the IAHSP International Association of Home Staging Professionals Europe, and I do stage.
That's very cool. And so where do you stage in Rome, where you're living? And then what is your local real estate market like?
So I stage any properties in Rome and at the outskirts of Rome. I do also offer, online consultations and services to those people in need, or real estate agents or investors all around Italy. Of course, it has to be kind of a bigger project for me to accept and, move. But when it comes to the real estate sector, oh my God, it's really tough. It is because, first of all, the same effects, the negative effects that we had worldwide between 2008 and 2009 was what happened here as well. The market itself is still stagnant. Nothing sells. And we also have national statistics, real estate statistics, that they're showing that in Italy, the average that it takes for a property to sell, it's 220 days. And wow. That's a lot if we compare it to the US and the rest of the European country. So basically what sells nowadays, it's properties that are staged. Anything that is not staged or prepared in the best way to be commercially, placed on the market does not sell quicker than those 220 days. That is almost 10 months.
That's crazy.
We also were facing a very big problem, which is most of the agents don't get the real estate listing in as an exclusive listing, okay? Which means, just to be more clear, that the same listing can be sold by other agents, okay? So most of the times, like, you would see one seller, okay, approaching several different real estate agents and giving to all of them the opportunity to sell their property.
That is really tough on the agents.
That's really tough on the agents, and that's one of the major issues that we're having and the reasons why our services are not taken into consideration. From those agents who did comprehend how valuable our services are, but it's not a profitable action for them to hire a professional home stager to stage the property without having without being certain that then they will be the one to sell that property. Like imagine you and I now, I invest in home staging, okay?
Right.
And then all of a sudden you are more lucky than me and sell the property, but I've invested in staging.
Right.
So usually the agents who are able to obtain the listing in exclusivity are the ones more keen towards staging.
So when you first moved back to Rome, was staging pretty new in the marketplace?
Oh yeah, and it's still to be considered as a new service. Because not everyone, I would say not even 50% of all real estate agents do comprehend and do value our services. We have to have that sort of a mental shift towards home staging is an important investment to be done, in order to sell at a better price and in the shortest amount of time. So as long as they perceive home staging as a cost, okay, I see that, we will have some more tough time into educating the sellers, and this meaning also the general public and real estate agents as well.
Yeah, I imagine it's very tricky because I think in the States, pretty much when you sign a contract, it's exclusive for the listing agent to represent the property. But it seems like it's very common in Italy where you will have both, actually. You will have agents that have exclusivity, but you also have listings where it's just anybody who can sell it.
Yeah, poor agents, let me tell you that. And it turns out that you never know who's going to sell the property. You never know if the investments of any sort that you're, putting towards, like the professional photography, marketing material, is going to be worth it at the end of the day. Okay.
That is very challenging. So how do real estate agents get exclusivity for the listings?
Well, they have to, and this is my personal opinion, of course, they have to differentiate themselves from the others, okay, from the whole crowd, and let the sellers know that they work differently than anybody else and that they're reliable, and then they will, make it happen in a shorter amount of time and for the best, at the best price. And that's why home staging is really crucial in a complicated market such as the Italian one.
I see. And so when you first moved back to Rome from Chicago, was it really difficult to reestablish yourself as a stager?
Oh yeah, it was really difficult because the market was not ready at all. Okay. There was a lack of information, and I had to completely rebrand myself in terms of the whole corporate identity. I had to approach different type of market because we all know that home staging is a blossoming industry in the US, and it's quite easier and less challenging to approach real estate agents because most of them know when we say home staging, what we mean with staging a property, okay, for sale. It is very tough on you when you go out there, you market yourself, and as soon as you say, I'm a professional home stager, the first question is like, home stager, who, what do you mean? So people don't know what you don't tell them. It's all about having to educate them. So probably, rebranding, the new corporate identity was the easiest thing throughout my transition. One of the challenges that I had to face was, the warehouse. How everything is smaller in Europe and more expensive. Mm-hmm. We don't have this huge rental opportunities or storages. So finding a commercial space and start rebuilding the inventory was not only quite expensive, but again, very challenging.
That's crazy. So do you have your own warehouse then for your inventory?
Yeah, it's fairly tiny warehouse if we compare to what staging professionals do have in within United States. So my business model had to slightly change and adapt to difficulties that I'm facing on a daily basis here. In terms of one of the examples could be, how many home staging professionals use cardboard furniture here?
Yes,
Just to
I've seen
avoid
that.
all the logistics problems. I am not, and I never was and never will be, a huge fan of the cardboard furniture. I just feel that they don't look real, don't feel good, and of course it determines a certain quality. I don't want to use the word poor quality of the projects. So I had to kind of redevelop myself and face directly the issues that I was facing with bulky pieces. So basically, everything that I would need for a vacant project in terms of, again, bulky furniture like sofas, beds, and other stuff, I have to purchase them directly for that specific project, have them delivered to the property, and then instead of getting it back to the warehouse, I sell them right away as soon as the property is rent or sold.
Oh, that's very clever. That's great.
It is very clever because that allows me to earn twice.
Yes.
Because the way I market, the pieces that I want to sell once the property sells is I tell them, the sofa is for sale, brand new, never been used, and I'm using the professional photography that has been, used to market that project. So the product itself looks fantastic. I describe it as, brand new and never been used. So let's say, for hypothesis, if that specific sofa did cost like 350 euros, it's been already charged and included in my proposal. I have already received the money from the client, which means, the first time that I'm, actually gaining money out of the project. And then I would knock off a certain percentage for that specific sofa or a product. And then, gain money from reselling it. And plus, I'm not facing the logistic issues of having to, move it down from the 5th floor. How we have more apartments and condos than, single detached houses, which involves additional logistic issues and problems in terms of our elevators are very small. And narrow. So I would need 2 movers, and almost nothing can be, brought down by the elevator itself.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot in Paris, actually, where there's like this giant moving truck, and there's basically an elevator within the flatbed part where they just put all the furniture up and then raise everything up and then deliver through these tiny Parisian windows. It's quite something to see, actually. And every time I walk by that, I just feel very blessed I don't do staging in Paris, because that would be a nightmare for me.
I know. We also face it on a daily basis, parking issues. I think about, historical center cities where you're not even allowed to bring your truck in or your car.
Right.
So what happens before the restriction, as a timing restriction for the historical zones hit in, which is in Rome at 7 a.m., we have to drive before 7 in order to get through.
Wow, that is crazy. My gosh.
It is. And it's funny because it's just so different than staging a vacant property in North America. So when I receive requests for proposals of, occupied properties, I feel really relieved.
That's great.
Yeah.
So what kind of agents do you normally work with? Do you work with agents that have exclusivity? I can't say that word. Exclusivity on the listing itself, or you work with all types of agents?
It really depends, Cindy. it depends upon clients and the property, and of course the amount of money that I could eventually earn from that specific project. It depends also, that specific agent can have different type of clientele and not always have the exclusive listing. So it comes down to what the moment offers and what that specific real estate agent has to offer me at that time to either accept or decline. But most of the time, when it comes down to vacant properties, they have to have the exclusive listing.
Okay. That makes more sense because the cost for that is significantly higher. And so in Italy, where you're working, is the seller paying for staging or is the real estate agent paying for staging?
Most of the time, it's the seller.
Okay.
Sometimes they agree. For example, what I'm trying to push by informing and educating, the agents is that I always tell them, make sure that you're taking advantage of this incredible marketing tool, which is home staging. Boost your commission and let them know that you, as I said earlier, you are working differently than anybody else. This will help them acquire that listing as an exclusive, and then let them just have an amazing experience where you're taking care of everything. Taking care of everything means, not only preparing the property for sale, but also taking care of the photography aspects. I don't do my own, I don't take my own pictures of my projects as majority of European home stagers do. As 90% of home stagers in Europe, they do take their professional photography of their own projects. So they do take care of that aspect as well. I don't do, and as many stagers in the US don't.
Right. Yeah, we hire a photographer for that. So
yeah, so I do hire a photographer, and that's also another, a part of this peace of mind, okay, for the real estate agent, that he doesn't have to manage all this, additional aspects. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I hope I've answered clearly your question. Did I?
Yeah, no, you did. And so when you first moved in, it's a new market for home staging, and you're new completely in the marketplace. So what were some of the things that you did to establish yourself?
I did probably the most basic things, as, having my own new brochures, leaving leaflets with home staging statistics, explanation of what actually home staging is. Because back in 2016, everybody, like the professionals who are already working in the Italian market, they used to call home staging as enhancing a property for sale. Okay, so the wording enhancing was already something that would eventually generate objections. Like, why would I enhance my property? What is it wrong? And how the right definition is professionally preparing a home for sale. Not only does it sound better, but it's perceived in a more correct manner. And again, it doesn't generate that objection. What's wrong with my family? I want our listeners to remember one thing. When we say Europe, okay, we mean it and we see it as a continent, okay? So there are 54 countries. And if we, put this in confront with the United States as it's meant, as a big continent almost, okay, made out of 50 states, you guys there speak all the same language, right?
Right.
In Europe, we don't. We have language barriers, cultural barriers. Not only that, but also heritage-wise, everything is so different. So for us, even the wording home staging had to be adapted to our countries and, culture-wise as well. Mm-hmm. So the way it came to Italy was okay, it's an English word. How are we going to explain to people what homestaging is? So the definition that they have given was enhancing a property for sale. If you speak with UK people and UK professionals, they would tell you that homestaging is, dressing the property. In the Scandinavian countries, they call homestaging, real estate styling. And we all know that homestaging has nothing to do with designing, styling, or decorating, right?
It has some, but yeah, it's different. I mean, I think styling is a big component of it because you're styling for a lifestyle, basically. I think you brought a really good point is that the wording of it is very important and the perception of what we do is very important as well. And in real estate, because I started out as a real estate agent before I was a stager. And when I first got into the industry, this is like 15 years ago, but they were saying that, you should dress the way you want to be perceived as, like you're already successful. And that's why when I started out as a real estate agent, there was this thing about driving a better car or having better clothes or have a really nice purse, et cetera, is to feed into that perception. I don't think that's very healthy, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And, but I think it does illustrate the point is that the consumers needs to understand what exactly staging is. Because like when you were saying that in Italy, you were saying it as an enhancement and people automatically thought, oh, were you saying what's wrong with my house?
What's wrong with my property? Yeah. And that's exactly what is happening. And I do agree with you. Styling is a component.
Yes. Like, it's not all of it.
Yeah. Exactly. So this is almost like as selling it for something that it actually is not. Misperceiving. Is that the word correct? Right? Misperceiving it.
Yeah.
And so why should people be focused on dressing or enhancing or styling? Homestaging should be seen and perceived as professionally preparing a property for sale. It's a communication tool. It's the real estate marketing tool, regardless the geographical location and regardless the language.
Right. Yeah, and it's a very different attitude as well. So I met with the head of UK Staging Association here last week for coffee, Paloma, and she's great. Yeah. But we're talking about how in Sweden, for example, they always stage before the property goes on the market. And I've looked at like several different larger real estate agencies like Fantastic Frank in Sweden. They have offices now in Germany and Italy and obviously in Stockholm as well. And they really make it a whole thing where they have their own stylists in-house. They come and stage the property completely and they shoot it professionally like a toy or like a magazine. And they have lookbooks for their properties. And it looks absolutely, I mean, it's really like the high end, the highest level of real estate marketing I've ever seen. It just
in my humble opinion, it's also this is a cultural aspect. Okay, Swedish, Scandinavian people, they really love their properties, their homes. Okay. And so for them, presenting it at its best not only comes fairly easy as a process or as a thing that has to be done. Also the way they live in their homes, very minimal and the Scandinavian, of course, style.
I love it, but I can't do it though.
Almost very easy to stage. Like think about having to stage an occupied Scandinavian property. That would be a piece of cake because they almost have everything perfect to be staged to that specific environment and culture and the market.
Right.
So other ways of approaching the market and getting my way around was, I don't want to call it door to door from agency to agency, but this is something that I've done quite a lot back in 2017. And it did work because it was a direct approach. Okay. Because sending an email or making a phone call, first of all, it wasn't very direct. And second, I've seen that it was completely a waste of time because nobody would even, reply to those emails. But, visiting the real estate agents or brokers within the agencies was easier because I was able to approach a physical person, like a person, and say, hey, can I just share about who I am and what I do, what are the benefits, and how I can help you be more successful and sell for more in a shorter amount of time. So that did help a lot. And BNI, I don't know if you ever heard of Business Network.
Yeah, we have a lot, yeah.
So that did really kind of, help me paving my way around. And that brings us back to the word of mouth, which we might be in 2019 year, but it does really still work.
That's great. I think ultimately real estate is still a very much people business. It's very face-to-face. And that's why I get really frustrated when new stagers email me and they say, oh, I did my office presentation and I emailed and I heard nothing from it. I mean, email is so easy to ignore. Just think about how many spam email, how easily it is for you to just swipe left and then delete that email. And it's the same with marketing. So I think it really has come down to you have to be persistent. You have to make that face-to-face happen.
I do have my opinion, which is, how we're so different and unique, okay? Each one of us is different and unique. Our business models are different, okay? The properties, the projects are different, and so are the needs, okay? The real estate agents and the market. So my suggestion, especially for the newbies, the newer and the younger stagers, is find your way. Find what is that really works the best for you. I see many, investing a lot of time and money on social media and getting nothing out of it. So see what works the best for you. It might be, giving office presentation. For somebody else might be in a specific market, phone calls. Or somebody might receive plenty of requests from Instagram, somebody else from other social platforms. I do personally receive many requests from LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of percentage of those requests who became actual collaboration is still very low. I would guess like 25%, but different channels might bring you different opportunities and the different volume of business. So my suggestion again would be try to find what really works for you and for your business.
Yeah, I agree with that. It ultimately depends on where the clients are hanging out, and that's where you should go look for your clients and get to know them and be on the platform where they're at. This is the same. It's like looking for a husband. You're not going to find one sitting at home hoping they're going to email you. You have to go out and meet people. That's the same thing. So I always have these like dating analogy when it comes to finding clients. It's the same.
Yeah.
A lot of it is similar. So I know, I can't believe like the time goes by so fast when we're chatting. So I do want to get to a few questions from the listeners. So does a home stager focus just as much on the outside of a home and the inside?
Of course. I know that, different opinions are given through different, home staging training courses. I think that you should dedicate yourself and the focus as much as inside of the property to the outside, because the curb appeal has to be, immaculate when you prepare and present the property for sale, because they don't start their official tour from the kitchen or from the bedroom. They get off the car and what do they see? The exterior of the property, right?
Mm-hmm.
The curb appeal. And as I said, I don't know if it's properly staged, if the exterior has been prepared as well. How does the lawn look? Do you have any flowers? Does it really, show inviting? Does it invite you to want to know more by opening that front door? So definitely, yeah, absolutely.
And then in your experience, what are some of the recommendations you would give to boost curb appeal for a property?
I haven't done in recent 18 months, not even one recommendation for the curb appeal, because we're doing more, as I said, condos and apartments. But this used to be my daily bread, back in the US, as 90% of my business was single detached properties. So definitely, according also to seasons, if it was a spring season, or rather than the autumn, like rake your leaves, make sure that, it's always like tidy, neat and clean. If it was winter, shovel the snow. In the spring, make sure that you plant some flowers or that you cut your grass. Barb teaches us that, trees and bushes are just as kids, they grow. So you got to trim them, clean the windows, make sure they're always clean. It has to be inviting. Stand in front of your property and ask yourself, does my home really look inviting? Would it look inviting for others?
Right. I think that's a really key point. And I think that's the thing with curb appeal. I think one of the very first thing I was taught as a young real estate agent was that when you drive your buyer's client to the house, you want to park across the street, because they can really take in the entire house, and they can see the plot. They can see the whole thing, not just the house itself, but like everything around it. Because people are buying not just the box, they're buying also the land, the vegetation, like the plants, everything that comes with it.
You're buying the whole thing, everything. And that's exactly how I would, compare the fact that the driver would drive by and park on the other side to those buyers who are starting their, research for the home sweet home online. What does it happen, in today's jungle, whatever, it is, Redfin, Zillow, or other, real estate platforms, marketplaces here in Europe. Like you put all the necessary criterias, and then you start scrolling until you don't see that beautiful image, the picture, okay? Regardless if it's from the curb appeal or indoors, living room or a bedroom, and you stop, you point your finger to that specific picture that did, attract your attention, because there's a lot of, psychology behind home staging as well. So it is really important how you present yourself, and starting from staging, going to the professional photography, and adding all those additional, services, that it might be a virtual tour and anything else that might come, afterwards.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And one of our listeners always also asked, do stagers also stage inside the kitchen and bathroom cupboards? I know it's a random question, but I mean, buyers do, it does sound like random, but buyers do open them. That's the thing. Buyers will open any kind of like storage that you will have when they're touring. So is that something that you stage as well?
Well, let me tell you, I have my professional policies. That's how I've been trained through stage homes. So in my case, I don't kind of like going through people's stuff. If the property at the time that I'm, inspecting the property itself, I see that it's something that I don't want to go and dig deeper, opening cupboards, and regardless if it's kitchen or bathroom, then I would say, I'm sorry, but unfortunately, according to my professional policies, this is something that I do not include in my services. Okay. Or if it's necessary, because buyers do open those cupboards as well as they open, the wardrobes, okay, the built-in. I would bring a person who will do that work for me. But definitely for buyers to understand, especially the depth, okay, of the closets, they have to be, at least clean. And like less has always been more. So remove everything that is unnecessary, okay?
Yeah, I agree with that. I personally don't stage them, but if it's open shelving, I do.
Oh yeah,
Otherwise, it's going to look
of course.
weird. It's just empty. But and the thing personally, majority of our jobs were vacant staging, so we don't really have
Mhm.
the issue of, because we have had sellers filling things up to the brim. You know, like you open a thing, there's like tons of containers and cups and mugs and all that stuff. And usually we just tell them to, like you said, like pack up the extra stuff they're not going to use, because buyers are going to peek into storage spaces. It just, people want to know. I mean, you know, they understand you're living here now, but they want to know, they want to be able to see how much storage that they can have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that crucial point of being able to envision themselves living within that property. And if I do the consultations, regardless written or, walk and talk, I always tell them, make sure that you clear, okay, and make enough space. So especially for buyers to understand the depth of the closets. If they don't do that and then call me in to stage the property, I would leave it the way it is. But you know how we work with the buyer's budget and the time frame? You know, sometimes on the occupied properties, they say, yes, I will do that. And then eventually they never get a chance. And all that is, extra, they just open the cupboards or the closets, and then they just throw the extra stuff in there. So at least for the day that the professional photographer comes to shoot the pictures, the house is clean. But I always then have to make sure and let them know, please do these chores before the first open house, or, before the agent comes in with a potential buyer.
Yeah. And I think it's incredibly difficult to live in a stage home, to be honest, because the real estate agent is going to show whenever clients are coming by. In the real estate, I mean, in the States, I think agents are more aggressive, because this is one of the things I learned being in UK, because I've been looking for flats to rent.
Mm-hmm.
For September when I moved here. And I noticed that agents here are not very responsive. And then when I met with Paloma, she's like, yeah, because they're on salary. It's not like in commission in the States. So they're just like, whatever, I'll get to you when I get to you kind of thing. So I don't want to do as much work as I want, because they're not really commission driven. And it's very
Here's
different.
my point. When it is very difficult and complicated, to live in a staged property. So first of all, staging is not a condition, okay? That not being a condition, it has to be perceived, and there has to be a big difference between the vacant staging and staging the occupied properties. You gotta be, as a home staging professional, you have to allow those people to live, okay, in the property through the selling process, okay? So by not being a condition, it doesn't have to be or show perfect, okay? So basically, what are we looking at when we speak about lived-in occupied property? You have to remove the unnecessary. You have to kind of clear up the space. You have to make sure that, you comply with all these principles of home staging, less is always more. But we have to keep in mind that these people will live there, and put them in the situation to, live without any hesitation or any anxiety, because it's already anxious process having to sell your property, because we never know why and what's the real reason behind I have to sell my property. It can be death reason, divorce, not always pleasant situations, Cindy. We have to keep all these variables in our mind when we approach the sellers, not only us. I think this is also a thing that a real estate agent should have in mind. On the other hand, who has the most interest in selling faster and for the most amount of money? The real estate agent, the homeowner, or the stager?
Usually the seller and the agent who wants to make money.
You're getting the whole portion. Like, you're selling your property. It's your biggest asset, okay, that you have. So you should be the one who's working more in order to obtain that, goal.
Yeah, I understand. It's just, I think it could be challenging in terms of
It
depends on people's lifestyle, I think. And so when we work with clients on redesign project, we always ask, where are some of the areas that's heavily trafficked, for example?
Oh, yeah.
Because you need to make sure they can still live in the house if they have to. And some of the agents actually make a recommendation is that put your home on the market and you go on vacation. And this way they can show the house very aggressively in the very beginning, right? And then they can really market it. And I think because we were in the Bay Area, it's a bit different because typically homes sell within 30 days just because it's high demand but low supply kind of situation. But I understand that like in Italy, where if you're on the market for 200 days, it's impossible to vacation for 200 days.
Oh, you can vacation, although people would love in Italy.
I would love to vacation for 200 days. That would be amazing.
Yeah, as we said, so many variables.
Yeah, so I think it can be difficult to live in a stage house. There's always expectation. You always have to do dishes, for example. You can't cook very heavily scented food kind of thing. Yeah. And so it's maintenance. It's kind of accommodating yourself. But I think you're right. It's that you have to remember the final goal is that you want to get as much equity as possible out of your home sale. Absolutely. Otherwise, all this hard work is going to waste if you're not pushing as hard as you can to really make it happen.
You're absolutely right. And you know how many times I've done occupied stagings for family with like 2, 3, 4 kids, dogs and cats. They still have to live their life through the selling process, but you gotta kind of educate them on what's the best for them if they want to see that equity sitting in their bank account as soon as possible.
Yeah. And then we also have questions about buying wholesale artwork. I understand it's very different in Europe because we have like trade shows all the time where people can go and then buy wholesale. Is that something similar in Europe, or do you always buy retail?
Most of the time I buy retail. Lately, I've been in touch with a couple of companies. One is in Malaysia and one in China. They're selling wholesale, beautiful abstract art, especially more towards luxury staging. For a reasonable price. I've never shopped wholesale in the US because I knew back then in 2013, because as I said earlier, because of my husband's, job, we've moved in 20 years over in 5 countries. So never had the wholesale experience in the US. I do purchase some of the great artwork that I have in my warehouse. You would never believe, from Amazon. From a company from Germany. That's very cool.
Do you remember the name by chance? You mean they ship to the US and they sell in Amazon in the US?
This German company, through Amazon as a platform and ship all over to Europe.
That's cool. Because I think one of the challenges European stager is to find inventory. I noticed that with the stagers here in the UK. It's that I think it's different. I think in the States, me and Anthea was talking about this the other day on the show, that like I feel like a lot of us in the States really have it for granted because it's so much easier in a lot of different ways. Like we can have very easily accessible vendors through wholesale, where European stagers, you basically have to buy retail. And so when you are reselling it to the buyers, are you reselling them on the retail price then? Or do you give them a discount? How do you do it?
There's no such a thing as discounts when I sell them artwork. I gotta be candid with you. In every business, everybody must be happy. You want that art, you like it. It took me some, time to source, to have it shipped all the way to Italy, to store it. Again, I really have, high prices for my storage units, the warehouse, the way I call it. So they're paying the price that I ask them to. Awesome. And the same is happening, with rugs.
Right.
It's a Turkish company that sells through Amazon. we do start receiving more offers from retail companies, like major ones, that they're offering right now, like B2B discounts. And through IAHSP Europe, we do receive great, discounts from our vendors. So I can't say it's almost a retail price, but it's really definitely a great discount.
I see. So when you're putting proposal together for your clients, do you breaking down the cost in your line item, like how much staging is going to be, how much delivery is going to be, or you just give them that one number that includes the whole package?
I used to do that all the time in the US, and I faced a couple of objections that became almost, unpleasant situation of clients being very rude and saying, "Oh my God, you're charging me all this as a delivery fee and you're earning like 100 euros per hour. Are you crazy? I have to work like for 1,300 for the whole month. And you're asking me this specific amount." And I was like, okay, now on, nobody's gonna have, my pricing by chores and like being broken down. Give them the bulk price, and I say, you want to achieve your goal, sell faster, best price, you want to position yourself differently than the others, this is the amount that you have to invest.
That's great. I love it. It's so boss. It's just like you have to pay this price.
Sorry. I didn't want to seem or result in being bossy, but hey, I'm facing challenges every single time when I'm approached by a client, when I send in a proposal. Most of the time is like, "Oh my God, you're so expensive." And I'm like, oh, I'm almost there to tell them, yes, and you're so cheap. Like I have better, clients who are willing to pay more. This because other professionals in my area, unfortunately, have undersold our services. Okay. And you know how everything is about understanding our value, who we are, what's our educational background, to show and to prove the quality of my education, of my expertise. So I want to work with a certain clients and certain niche who perceive the value of our services and who see that expense as an investment, knowing that that initial investment in home staging in terms of return will be up to 5 times, sometimes higher.
Right. Yeah, I think the attitude is very important. I don't mean like you sound very bossy, but I meant that like, you just sound like a proper business owner is what I'm saying. Because I think a lot of times, especially women, we feel scared, or we feel worried, or we feel how people are going to look at us kind of thing if we ask for the price we're worth. And I think from interviewing so many different stagers who are successful, one of the common thread is always that people are not afraid to charge what they're worth. And that's why they're not competing in the bottom run. They're not like slashing down the price just to get a job. It's because they're confident in their professionalism and their ability to stage and deliver for their clients. And so they know they're worth this X amount of dollar, and they're not afraid to ask for it. And I think that's really what separates successful and unsuccessful stagers.
And most of all, it attributes yourself the value, okay, that you have as a professional. I've learned from my grandparents that in order to be respected, you have to respect yourself first.
Right.
And so, never feel afraid. And this would be my suggestion to those who are starting, is to charge the amount of money that you feel it's necessary to deliver a stellar or high quality, performance. I've had some situations where, and this ties us back to the previous question, who pays for staging here in Italy? I had a couple of realtors who I like really to work with them because they've understood what staging does, which is magic, and they're the one to pay for staging, okay? So in a specific situation that occurred a couple of months ago was the agent had the exclusive listing, okay, for 6 months. And the exclusivity goes up to 6 months only, okay? It can't be given for more than that as a time frame. So what happened, he was going towards the end of his 3rd month. He called me and he said, hey, listen, you got to help me. I have only 90 days. I want to make sure that I don't lose this client and that I can actually sell. It was an occupied property. We do make distinction in Europe between an occupied property from the lived in. Lived in means occupied and furnished. All right. And then we have those type of properties that are only furnished, but then not lived in. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
So that house was closed for 10 years. Okay. The owners passed away and the son lives in Milan. So nobody even for once have opened those windows in the 10 years. Okay.
Wow.
I did write a proposal after viewing the property, very dated, back in the 80s. It is completely to be, renovated and remodeled. So my proposal was, fair. He said, I don't have all this money because I'm paying you. And he said, this is what I have as a budget. Could you please do anything that fits within that budget to present the property in a better way? Remember how I said for me staging should be working together with the seller and with the agent, with the budget and the time frame.
Mm-hmm.
We made the best out of that budget in just under 2 days, okay, 2 half days work. And guess what? The property did sell. It didn't sell for the amount, for the asking price, but still he was able to achieve that.
Yeah, I mean, and
it didn't look perfect. I actually didn't look great at all because I had to compromise down, on what the budget was able to offer. So no replacement of, newer, better, lighter, brighter looking furniture. So I had to work with what was there, but still I was able to achieve like a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference what home staging can make. And I think a lot of people they always thought that staging may have to be all new furniture, all new everything. But you have to work with what you have. If you're a seller and you have no budget, sometimes whatever you already own could be the best answer to your staging problem.
Absolutely.
And a lot of things can be DIY, like a lot of times, if your table it's not in good condition, a fresh coat of paint will do magic on it, to be honest. And a lot of times, even in our own staging inventory, we refresh them by repainting them.
I do that too.
Yeah, a spray paint is your best friend,
Oh, I know.
Paint is really the cheapest thing that can give a total transformation to a property or piece of furniture, pretty much anything, a room. So that's why there's a lot of solutions out there. And especially some of our listeners are in the area where they have no access to a home stager, a closest home stager maybe 2-hour drive away.
Yeah.
So we have had sellers who have ranch properties, for example. And so they did a lot of things on their own, like just, really learning how to remove and then make the space look bigger, with the existing furniture they had. So, yeah.
And I don't find absolutely anything wrong if a eventual consultation remains at that point, like that the stager is not going to get involved in a future process with staging and preparing the property, where the seller does the rest. I think any minor or major, solutions and situation or things that have to be or should be done in order to present the property at its best, is always better than leaving it in the original condition.
Right. Especially it hasn't been open since the 80s. You definitely need to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
The time, look at this. 70
I know.
minutes. I think we could go on and on and on. Isn't
I
it fun
know.
speaking about staging?
It is. The time always goes by so fast. I do try to keep the show like to 1 hour now because people complain sometimes the show goes on too long. But yeah, so I just have one last question for you.
Sure.
So what is the number one tip you'll give to someone who's thinking about putting their home on the market?
Oh, so the tip for the sellers?
Yeah. Or, real estate agents.
For the real estate agent, it would definitely be make sure that you hire a home staging professional / and real estate photographer, even if it's only for a consultation. Okay. While to the homeowners would be remember that the way we live in our property and the way the property should be, prepared and placed on the market are completely two different things. From starting from the outside, curb appeal, and all the way room by room, everything should look, I don't want to say perfect, but at least, nicely prepared, cleaned, and prepared for those potential clients who are going to walk through, who have to envision themselves living in that space. And because we have to remember that by selling that property, we're selling a specific lifestyle. So selling a property that it's dirty, untidy, not prepared is going to be perceived in that exact way, okay, as an untidy, unprepared, and dirty, lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Especially, I think a lot of listings now in Europe are still on stage. So whatever you can do to really spruce up the space, it's going to really differentiate yourself from the other listings.
Yeah, and it's really a picky thing. Now I'm gonna, wrap up by just giving you a couple of other numbers. Okay, so in 2018, 575,000 properties. So a little bit over 500,000 of properties have been placed on the market. Okay, for a total of 9.5 billions of euros, okay, which is like slightly over 10 billions of dollars. The conversion, and not even 5% have been staged.
That's amazing. How did you get these statistics?
So most of the statistics from the real estate sector are given to us by the Bank of Italy. Wow. While the national home staging statistics are provided by the two national Italian home staging associations. And there's also a company, it's called Numisma. If somebody wants to go and look them up online, they do the stats, okay, for the real estate sector. And it came down that the average price reduction is 14%, while the national associations have gathered the numbers, and the stage properties, so as I said, sell on an average 47 days, and the discount, so the price reduction is only an average of 4%.
I think that is amazing. The stat's amazing, but I also think it's amazing that you have all these different organizations putting stats together, because I think in the States, most of the real estate stats really only coming from National Association of Realtors. Yeah, so it could actually be a vacuum because you don't really hear the stats from anywhere else. But the NAR stats, it is pretty credible because they do spend a lot of money in putting these studies together. But yeah, I think it's really amazing. You have all. I
would have done more if I were in charge of gathering statistics for the National Association of Realtors. I don't like how they break down by rooms. 54% of real estate agents tell you to stage the bedroom rather than the kitchen, or so and so. It's more about having the numbers. Remember, when we learn or when we get informed on certain topics, it's not only what we see by reading, it's what informations are caught by our eyes. And it's more likely that I catch the numbers, either if it's a dollar sign or a percentage sign. So now that I've told you like over 500,000 of properties, you're getting also a vision of what the volume on the market is. And you start, easily having all these numbers in terms of reduction, not reduction. Think about a property of €1 million, okay? If we don't stage, it will sit on a market for 220 days. And it will eventually see a price reduction of, let's say, 10%, right? 10% is 100,000 euros. If we would have staged that property, probably we would have staged it for, let's say, hypothetically for 25,000. How much money have you left on the table?
Right. Yeah, and that's why I think really staging is a very important tool when it comes to real estate marketing. I mean, it should be a package. That's why when I look at these Sweden real estate agencies, I mean, I think their marketing is incredible because it's every side of it. They have someone that comes in, style the property, make it look ready for the market, for the photos, for the open house, and then they produce it. They make it look like a magazine. And who wouldn't want to live in a home like that, right?
Absolutely.
So that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to help and support the show, there are 3 ways to do so. You can leave a review and rating on iTunes. You can share the show on social media, or you can donate to support the maintaining costs for the podcast. You can make a donation through the show notes or on the sidebar of our site. If you haven't left a review on iTunes, please do so. This will help us grow the show and book more guests. If you have any questions, feedback, and suggestions, you can comment on the show notes. You can also find the show notes by going to stagemore.com/podcast. That's it. Have a fantastic week and happy staging.